So the real puzzle you sent me this week was that weird text you sent me. Uh, are we Kanye West or Christopher Ellickson? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Eccleston.
Eccleston? Sure.
The yeah the okay. So I was driving at 3 a.m. For my job, and I was thinking about the show, and I was like, are we at the point now where people will look back and say, man, the show used to be really good, like Kanye West? Or are we Christopher Eccleston, the first Doctor of the Doctor Who reboot, where they say, just push through those first couple episodes, and then it's really good. But then I sent you another text that was, or are we the Volkswagen Rabbit? And
Yeah,
by
that
that
one.
I mean, no one ever liked it, and it really just kind of was forgettable, right? Like, that's kind of the third option, is that we never get good. We are like the Volkswagen Rabbit and just immediately forgettable.
What is the Volkswagen Rabbit?
There you go. That's perfect.
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
Are you aware of the company Volkswagen?
I am aware of the lying company Volkswagen, yes.
And they have the Beetle, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
They also came out with a car called the Rabbit that was totally forgettable and not very good. And so maybe that's who we are. We're the Volkswagen Rabbit of podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Solve It, the podcast where we solve puzzles, codes, and talk about the history of encryption. I'm Zach Johnson, and joining me as always is my co-host,
Sam Cherry.
How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing very well. So each week, one of us will make a puzzle for the other one to solve using a known system of encryption and explaining the history of that system. In order to fairly solve all these puzzles, we actually have some rules set in place. So rule number one, there must be rules. Puzzles have to use an existing system of ciphers or codes. And if you're keeping tabs, the puzzles that we have used so far is Caesar, Transposition, and Pigpen. Rule number two, everything needs to be there. All the clues you need to solve the code must be in the puzzle itself. Some clues can lead to other clues, so everything doesn't need to be there at the start, but no guessing should be required. But this week, we are incorporating a new rule. And Sam, would you mind explaining to our audience why we have a new rule?
In my defense.
Oh, I'm so ready for this defense.
I solved the puzzle.
Okay.
Bragging. And I solved it, I would say, like 80 to 90% there.
Mm-hmm.
The new rule is that you can't use a computer.
And a hush falls upon the crowd.
So what happened was I got the code, and I was trying different ciphers to solve it, and there are decoders that are on the internet. And so what I did was I just like typed it into a decoder, and instead of like going letter by letter to figure it out, I just was like, hey, computer, this is what I want, do this. And so it did it. But it felt gross. It like felt gross to like, I solved it and I was like, oh yeah, those are words, that's it. And I was like, ew, this does not feel.
Yeah, it is. Sam called me while I was biking and I was livid.
I knew the kind of cipher that it was, and I knew the code word. I just used a computer to do the brute work of it, but it felt gross. So
the new rules, rule number 3, puzzles must be solved by hand and not with a computer.
Like a cheater.
Okay, Sam. So this week I sent you a puzzle on Twitter to your handle at Samuel_Cherry_. And it is also on our website, solveitpodcast.com, where you can find all the episodes and pictures from previous weeks. And in lieu of answering whether or not you solved the puzzle, which is the question I ask every week, can you explain the puzzle that is in front of you?
Well, what I'm looking at here is Emerald Degassi. Is that his name? Emerald Degassi?
Lagasse, but yeah, continue.
I'm a racist. Emerald Lagasse, who's the famous television chef, and he's yelling and pointing, and he's got a little speech bubble that comes up, and it's got the cipher on it. And what we have is 5 groups of 3, and it's DOY space FRQ space URU space CUF space JOZ. And I assume that he is shouting his famous catchphrase.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We'll get to that later.
All right. But yeah, that is what we're looking at.
Yes, that is Creel chef, television personality, and Guy Fieri's Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Emeril Lagasse. The reason I chose him is to bring my own flavor to the podcast. In my notes here, I've written pause for laughter.
And then you remembered you were hosting with me.
Yeah. But for time concerns, I'm just going to move on past that. I'm just going to assume that they have paused the episode and they have like laughed and now they have like started it again. So welcome back. Okay, so unlike the Yoshi puzzle I sent you, this one does rely on having background knowledge that is not found in the picture. But just like in my last puzzle, the clue I gave you is in the way the words are separated. You can see that the letters are separated yet again to form 5 words. And each word has 3 letters in it that give you the clue as to what the code word is. Yes, I used a code word to kick it up a notch. My notes also say to pause here, but I'll just keep going. Sam, even though you know everything I'm about to tell you,
yes,
in an effort to both give you credit and prove that you're not a smarty smart, would you mind telling me what the cipher is called?
Oh, I would if I could pronounce it. It is a vignette? No idea.
It is not. It is actually pronounced visionaire.
Yeah, same thing.
So yeah, that both makes you look like, a dummy dumb, and also it gives you credit because you knew what it was. This cipher is a visionaire cipher, and it is named after its inventor, Blaise de Vigenère. Well, sort of inventor. The real inventor was an Italian cryptographer named Battista Balasso, who first described the cipher as early as 1553. But it was later misattributed to Vigenère, making Balasso the Hydrox of the cipher world. Do you know what Hydrox is?
I do not. I do not know what a Hydrox is.
I'm a really big believer in Hydrox. It sounds like Hydra, the thing from Marvel, but it's not that.
It does. That's kind of what I thought it was.
It's not like a Nazi organization. Hydrox was the company that came out with the Oreo before the Oreo.
Oh, yeah.
The Oreo stole that, and then now people think that Hydrox is the one that is a ripoff of Oreo when it's the other way around.
They're like the GoBots of cookies?
Yeah, yeah. Belaso is both the Hydrox and the GoBots. Yeah, those are actually our we have 3 sponsors now. I think we have sponsored by the Volkswagen Rabbit, the GoBots, and Hydrox. I feel like we could call on them and see if we can't get a deal arranged. The cipher was invented as a more complex form of the Caesar cipher, which was in the first episode. The Caesar cipher can be cracked very easily by brute force. So if you kind of like in a Caesar cipher guess a few letters, you can kind of assume what number the letters are. I don't know. I described that in a weird way.
What you're referring to is frequency analysis, right?
Yes, exactly that.
So if you have a puzzle with a bunch of like Z's in it, okay, well it's probably not the letter Z. So you can assume it's a more common letter like E and shift it over to E, and then you have your number and shift the rest of them.
Yeah, exactly that. So that's why the Caesar cipher kind of fell off. This cipher works only if you have a code word or a code phrase, which is a vast improvement from previous ciphers. In 1917, Scientific Magazine actually called this the unbreakable cipher, which from this episode alone, you will realize that is not true.
Right.
Once you know the system, it's actually an easy cipher to understand. And once you know if a person uses the same code word or phrase over and over again, then it is a very easy cipher to crack. Many scientists actually tried to improve this cipher, and one of the most successful scientists was a man named Gilbert Vernam, but more on that name later. This cipher works on something called a tabula recta, or Vigenère square. what it looks like is a 26 by 26 grid with all the letters of the alphabet on both the vertical and horizontal sides of the grid. On the square, each row and column begins with the letter the row or column is assigned. So, for example, the A row will begin with an A and go A, B, C, D through the entire alphabet. But the B row will begin with B, C, D, E, F, and at the end, after Z, it'll go back to A, so it'll roll over. This pattern continues throughout the square until Z, where Z, for example, is Z, A, B, C, D, E, and ends at Y, and so on. Does that make sense? Am I making sense, Sam?
Yeah, it kind of looks like a big multiplication table, but for letters.
Yeah, exactly. And if we're not making any sense, you can use the future box that you are inevitably holding and look up the Vigenère square to get a visual.
Unless you're using a telegraph, and in which case,
yeah, then
we'll get you out of the bunker soon enough. We're coming. Don't worry.
So once you have the square, all you need is the message and a code word or phrase. So let's say, for example, the message is Sam loves puzzles. And the code phrase is something like, oh, I don't know, but always cheats.
Sure, hypothetically.
Hypothetically, you would find S on the vertical line and correspond it to B on the horizontal line, which, if you're looking at the square, is T. And you would continue using this until the entire message is encrypted. Oh, and by the way, that message fully encrypted is TUMLZREQHWGDLXK. And I will put it on a t-shirt to subtly mock you forever.
That's so pretty. I should name my first child that.
As I said earlier, in order to solve this puzzle, you would need a code word that is 3 letters long. So do you have any idea on what that code word might be?
I would assume that it is Emerald Lagasse's catchphrase, BAM.
BAM, exactly right. Those of you who are familiar with Emerald's illustrious career will know that this is his signature catchphrase. I was kind of banking on you not knowing who he was. And I don't know why I would ever think that. Like, you and me are both millennial leeches with master's degrees in useless pop culture trivia. So,
yeah,
of course you would know that. I was like,
yeah.
I made this puzzle like sitting on a beach, and I was like, oh my gosh, Sam's gonna think it's so funny when he sees just BAM a bunch of times. That'll be so funny. And then like I immediately, the second you said you solved it, I was like, oh yeah, duh, because it's so easy.
When I was a kid, I really liked Emerald Lagasse, despite not knowing his last name.
Oh, well, and that's a fun origin story for everyone, that Sam had an affinity for Emerald Lagasse whenever he was younger.
I did.
He's
a cool guy.
Had dreams of becoming a chef, and then
I did.
Decided to become a podcast writer instead. Oh, how times have changed. Okay, so now sometimes it's a code phrase, but in the case of a code word like the one I sent you, you would just simply repeat the code word over and over and over again so the spaces are filled. So the code is 15 letters long, and so 15 divided by 3, which is letters in BAM, is just 5. So I made sure that mine repeated all the way through, and so that BAM could be said 5 times. I thought it was funny.
So if you're trying to decode it, what you would do is you would write out the whole phrase, and then on a line above it, write BAM, BAM, BAM until you got to the end, correct?
Yes.
And then you would go through and like for if it had an A above it, you would go to the A column and solve it that way. So you would go through each one using a different column, just depending on where in the word BAM it is.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay.
Okay, well, at this point in time, I'm going to pretend that Sam is solving the puzzle.
Yeah,
and while Sam is, quote, solving the puzzle, I'm going to say one last thing about this puzzle. This cipher was often used by the Confederate Army during the Civil War, but they were cracked very easily because they had used the same keywords and phrases over and over again. Throughout the war, the Confederates relied on 3 code phrases: Manchester Bluff, Complete Victory, and as the war came to a close and the Confederate Army surrendered, what was the code that they used?
Retribution. Also, Come Retribution is a book about Abraham Lincoln, which is what I thought, which I'm sure that's why.
Yeah.
But
it's a book about like I think Abraham Lincoln and like the spies in the Confederate War.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because when I looked it up, I saw a picture of Abraham Lincoln. I was like, oh, this of course is it.
Yeah. You thought it was just not, man, gosh. Ugh. Thought it was nonsense until you saw the picture of Abraham Lincoln.
No, I mean, I knew it was.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us this week on Solve It. I'm Zach Johnson, co-hosting with Sam Cherry. You can find us both on Twitter at @1ZachJohnson and @Samuel_Cherry_. Or you can find the Solve It Podcast at Solve It Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Or you can follow us on our website, solveitpodcast.com. Join us next week when Sam teaches you how to use a 12th century shield to find the location of the Holy Grail. Thanks. Bye.